Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming in today. Again, my name is Gina Becerril. I work at a couple of blocks from here at Occidental College. I just want to make my push there for people to come and visit. It's a very lovely campus if you haven't come down to visit. And I'm actually part of the family here. I live in South Pasadena. Have my son in the starting kindergarten class at Arroyo Vista, so I'm happy to come and help out my community with what I think are some of my expertise, and I hope I can help you today. So we're going to go through what's the basics of financial aid, kind of like understanding what is financial aid. Are the majority of you here today parents of seniors? Can you raise your hands? Okay, all right. So we've got a good number of seniors. So think about this process as what's going to happen now, because a lot of the things are quickly approaching now, especially for you seniors, on applying for financial aid. So let's begin. All right, so the purpose of what we call need-based financial aid, and there's a difference between what is need-based and what is non-need-based, and we'll get into that a little bit further down. But need-based financial aid gives the opportunity for students to access college, to have a choice among colleges, and it's not a reward for academic merit, because a lot of students think, well, I won't get the scholarships, I won't get the money to go to school if I don't get good grades. Basically, your good grades are in order for you to get into college. That's the admissions office. That's not our office. We do not look at that information at all. We don't look at, what the type of student you are. We look at families.
We have to go. The screen.
Oh.
I know it loses its thing. Sorry. Let's see. There we go.
Isn't that how updated college looks like?
Yeah.
Now we'll go back. Okay, we'll go back to where you were here. This one?
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to set it back up there?
Sorry about that.
Keep tapping it.
Okay. All right. So it's on your handouts too, so you can follow me there too, just in case this goes into the nature. So again, it's the ability for students to receive financial aid. It gives them the opportunity to have access to colleges, a choice among colleges, and it's not a reward for academic merit. So the basic premise is that the parents and the students are the primary source of paying for their child's education. Parents, you cannot say, this is what I'm willing to pay for their college. I mean, a lot of parents say, this is what we can do, and that's what your choices are going to have to be. But financial aid isn't awarded based on parents' willingness. That we have calculations to determine financial aid based on what you submit on the applications. But again, parents and students are the primary source, the responsible ones, to pay for the child's education to attend college. Some myths about financial aid. Like I said earlier before, a lot of people think that scholarships are only awarded to students who have good grades. That is not true. Financial aid, what my office handles, is completely based on the parents' resources. A lot of people think that you should only go to school that gives you the most money. It really has to come down to what can the family afford and what is the best fit for a student. I myself didn't really have much of the guidance, so I ended up going to the school that gave me the best package, and in the long run, knowing what I know now, I think I would have flourished much better, or had a better understanding or a better college life if I would have gone to a smaller institution. I went to UCLA. I love my school. I'm not, dogging UCLA or anything. I love my school, but I think seeing, what Occidental provides for its students and how they have relationships with their professors, I really envy that part of being a college student. So, you have to look at different things about, when you're making your choice of what's the better fit for you. Financial aid is only offered at some schools. Financial aid is offered at every single institution, whether it be a trade school, you want to be a pilot. If it's a school, it will offer financial aid. to your Ivy Leagues. Every single type of school offers some sort of financial aid. Well, the type and the money, that's very different because schools obviously have very different endowments. But every single school does offer financial aid. Only apply to the least expensive schools. A lot of the times I meet with families who are very surprised that they receive more financial aid at a private institution than they do at a state school. It's just a difference of, it comes down to a lot of different things. One, a family may have a very special circumstance where the state school is not going to take it into account, whereas a private institution has a little bit more, may have a little bit more leeway with their funding and can take that circumstance into account. So don't set your limits on only state schools because you look at that and you see what it costs and you think, okay, this is what we can afford. You need to open up the horizon and try different types of schools. Don't limit yourself based on the cost. A lot of people think that they won't qualify because their neighbor didn't or their cousin didn't. We tend as human beings to compare ourselves or feel equal to the people who are around us. So everybody has a different situation. I mean, I've seen people, families, I got files of people who were neighbors and they were very different people financially. So, and I'm sure that they each didn't know that, but you have to try everything, and if you don't get any financial aid, let us tell you that. Don't discount yourself because you think that something's not going to happen. Okay, so determining what financial aid is. So say, for example, it costs about $63,500 to go to college. That, I will break your heart right now, that is the cost of a private institution. The Occidentals, the USCs, the Harvard, the Columbias, this is probably what you're going to be looking at as the cost of attendance. Now say, for example, that after you've submitted all your applications and you're good to go after all your applications, it comes back, the calculation comes back that your family contribution is about $15,000. So from taking that away from the cost of attendance, you have $48,500 in this example, and that is your financial need. Okay, that's what the financial aid office will try to come up with in different packages from each school to provide the student to help them attend this school. However, a good question to ask to some of these schools, the schools that your children are applying to, is what need do you meet? Do you meet 100% of my need? Do you meet 75% of my need? Because a lot of schools will, for example, in this instance, $48,500 is your need, and some of the schools will only meet 75% of that need. So that means that you have a contribution, expected contribution of $15,000. In addition to that, 25% of the $48,500 will be your contribution. So you want to make sure when you're looking at your packages, some schools may look like, they were very, they gave you a really good packet, whereas another school didn't, and you're like, but my finances were the same, I gave them the same information. That might be the answer, that they're only meeting maybe 75% of your need versus 100% of your need. So it's a good thing to look at the websites of your schools. It'll probably be something that's publicized. If not, just give them a call and ask them that question. Because at that point, you may know that you can't afford it. If it's this and on top of that 25%, then it may be out of reach. Yes?
What is Oxy's policy?
We meet 100% of the need at Occidental. So what constitutes of a student's budget? It's tuition and fees, it's personal expenses, so it's an allowance for students to be able to live off. They need their shampoo, their deodorant, their everyday sort of needs. Room and board, so that's their dorm room and their meal plan on campus. And there's also books and supplies and transportation. Now, transportation may be very different depending on the school. So say you're here, you're a California resident, and your child's going to be going to New York, your transportation budget is going to be a lot larger than if your student was going to go to Occidental. So transportation back and forth isn't very high at all, whereas if they're going to New York, they're flying back and forth. So transportation costs, will rise. So make sure when you're looking at student costs that you're also calculating that into your budget as well, okay? The other thing to think about too is room and board. A lot of families who apply to Occidental locally, they think, oh, well, my kid will live at home, we live so close, we'll just, they'll just drive back and forth. Actually, there's a law, it's not a law, but it's a policy at our school that they have to live on campus for the first 3 years. So you can't have that choice of living off campus. You have to live on campus. Our school's very community oriented, and the way that we do that is by making sure that they're on campus for the first 3 years. So it's one of the things that if you're applying locally that you want to think of as well. Can they live off campus if they're going to be commuting? Okay, so what is it that we need in order to apply for financial aid? Required documents. First and foremost, it's the FAFSA. And I put on here that FAFSA website because it's very important for you to make sure you use that website in order to go to the FAFSA. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Now, a very smart lawyer that graduated from Hastings in San Francisco bought the website called FAFSA.com, and he charges $75 in order for you to complete your FAFSA. What's the first word on the FAFSA? Free, yeah. You shouldn't have to pay anything to complete the FAFSA. So make sure you don't go to FAFSA.com because they will charge you in order to complete it. It's legal, I know, it bugs us all the time. The next thing that you want to do in terms of looking at to see what colleges you're applying to is if they require the CSS profile. The CSS profile is an application that is sometimes required by private institutions. Like Occidental, we require the CSS profile. I also received my master's at Stanford, and they required the CSS profile as well. So a lot of private institutions will require both the FAFSA and the CSS profile. The other thing that I wanted to make sure you were aware of is that the last day for a California resident to submit their FAFSA, the deadline is March 2nd. However, institutions will establish their own date just because they want to make sure that they have enough time to review the students' applications that they're receiving in order to provide a financial aid package by usually the end of March. So, for example, at Occidental College, our date is February 1st in order to submit the CSS profile and the FAFSA. So you want to go to the school's websites to see what their deadlines are for the applications. Yes?
Okay, you said March 2nd of 2014?
March 2nd of 2014, if you're a senior, that's the latest you can submit your FAFSA.
But depending upon the college, maybe earlier, like yourself.
Yes, so depending upon the college, it will be earlier. So that's one of the reasons why you want to look at your college's websites and see when they are requiring the FAFSA or CSS profile. Yes?
What does EFC stand for?
EFC is expected family contribution. Yes?
Does that presume that you're going to have your tax returns done and filed?
So one of my next slides, and what we can go into this now, is that the FAFSA isn't available for you to fill out until January 1st. So for you seniors, you can't do it until starting January 1st of 2014. Okay, you say Happy New Year, and then you start doing your FAFSA. The CSS profile is actually available now. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of students who are applying early decision or early action. So private schools will use the CSS profile to get the financial aid information for students who are applying for these types of places. So you will use estimated information. You can either use last year's tax return to fill it out, or if that's not anywhere close to what it's going to be like for 2013, or therefore, if you have a special circumstance, then you use estimated information. Okay, so estimated information is okay on these applications. Yes?
So Gina, we have to do the FAFSA as well as the College Board profile. We have to do both.
Yeah, you only do both if the colleges are requiring you to do both. So that's why it's important to go on the college's websites to see which applications they're requiring. Some schools may require their own application. All schools will require the FAFSA, but schools may require the profile or their own application. For sure, UCs, Cal States will only require the FAFSA. Okay, but private institutions will probably require either the CSS profile or their own application. Yes?
Can we apply for Section 8 for more than one school?
Yes, so you're going to use the FAFSA. I believe the FAFSA this year has spaces for either 8 or 10 schools for you to submit your information to, as well as the CSS profile. If you have more schools that you're applying to, you will submit your FAFSA once to all those 8 or 10 schools that you're submitting it to. Once you receive what's called a student aid report, otherwise known as the SAR, student aid report, this is from the FAFSA, specifically the FAFSA. Once you receive a student aid report, which is a report listing all the information you submitted on your FAFSA, you can then go back into the FAFSA website, remove those schools that you listed, and put in the new schools, okay? And then resubmit it again. Yes?
I read today that the IRS, due to the federal shutdown, has delayed the forms this year, the filing debt, the first day of filing. So it's gonna put it to the end of January. Is that gonna change that?
I mean, it shouldn't impact, the federal shutdown shouldn't impact in the sense that you can, if you don't have your tax returns to fill out these forms, you could still use estimated information, okay? The other thing about the FAFSA, remember I said the FAFSA is free? Well, the CSS profile is not, okay? The CSS profile has a registration cost, which I believe is $25, and then I think each school is $16. So there is a charge for that application. If the student qualifies, then they will get a fee waiver, and that'll depend based on the information they provide on the CSS profile.
I didn't mention to you, we're going to do the FAFSA workshop
Yeah.
with Uxie
Mhm.
the second time
Yes.
in January.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll be doing a FAFSA workshop in January, line by line. So we'll be doing that so we can go through January 16th. I will be here, I'm told. And so then the IRS will also, you'll also need your tax returns, obviously, to complete these applications. So that's why that's there, and that's important. The other thing is, one of the counselors, I don't know if you want to talk about the GPA verification form, how this is completed here at this school. This GPA verification form is very important for a state California scholarship. So I'll have the counselor talk about that.
For South Pasadena, we have our students, we need permission from the parents to submit to the Cal Grants. So around November, December, your student will come home with a paper that you need to sign, you return it to us, and then we'll electronically submit everything for the Cal Grant. So you don't, the student doesn't need to submit it, but we do need permission from you, so we require that.
Is the Cal Grant for just state schools or private schools in the state of California as well?
They're for all the California schools.
San Marino High School, we submit the Cal Grant the GPA verification automatically. We do not need any forms or signatures. So it's automatic as long as, the only caveat to that is as long as the student social security number is on their transcript, and we talk to them about that in their senior meetings. So anyone that does not have their SSN number on their transcript, we call them in individually before March 2nd to make sure it's on there, so they will be submitted. No forms, don't come and remind us.
Please.
So that, the Cal Grant is submitted when?
By March 2nd.
Yeah, the GPA verification form needs to be submitted by March 2nd.
That when South Pasadena does it? The reason I'm asking is, what?
We will submit sooner. We will initiate the forms around November, December, and then starting January, we start sending out the Cal Grant. So if we run into any trouble, we'll be done by March 2nd.
It's the 7th semester transcript.
Oh, is it?
7th semester year.
Also, it'll include the work up until January.
Correct.
Yes. So the GPA verification will include 7 semesters of schooling.
Okay, I'm going to take one question in the back and then I'm going to move forward. Yes?
When you're working with these forms online, can we stop and start? Like, we have the ability to say, to set up an account and go in and only do part of it, storage or come back?
Yes, yeah, so on both of these applications, your student is going to log in with an ID and a password, and they can save the information and then save it and then come back later. Yeah, you can definitely do that as well. I'm actually going to move forward because I want to make sure that everybody gets the full application, and we'll have time for questions. Okay, so basic tips about filing for financial aid applications is to file early. I mean, I know the federal shutdown is not helping in this instance, but the sooner you file your tax returns, the better. I know there's a lot of people, especially with people with their own businesses, they get an extension and they don't file until October 15th. We do have students at Occidental that families do this, and they're struggling because we cannot release their financial aid until we have those tax returns. So they're having to make very, very monthly large payments to the college before their financial aid hits their accounts. So that's our scenario. I don't know about other schools, but just to let you know, give you a heads up that it's important to make sure to get your tax returns done as soon as possible. So again, estimated information is okay on these applications. If you're divorced, if you're a family that's divorced, then you include on these applications, you're going to have the custodial parent information only on the FAFSA and the profile. Okay, so for divorced families, the custodial parent will be the parent with whom the student lives with. Okay, so the student lives with the mom, then that's who goes on this application. If the student lives with the dad, then this is who goes on both of these applications. For the CSS profile, it is going to require the information of what we call the non-custodial parent. So the parent with whom the student does not live with, their information will be required. On the FAFSA, that information is not required. Okay? For remarried families, the information of the step-parent needs to be on these applications. It doesn't matter if they have a court order that, finances are separated, you pay for this, I pay for that. It doesn't matter. For federal purposes, both parents must be listed on, and their financial information, it must be listed on these forms. Okay, so the major change for the FAFSA this year, and in case you have other children who have filled out the FAFSA, or you're familiar with the FAFSA because of different reasons, the biggest change this year on the FAFSA used to be that if your child, it's the parents, the mom and the dad, or the mom and the mom, or the dad and the dad, you only listed one parent in that case. If there was a mom and the dad and they were not married, and if it was a mom and a mom, you only listed one parent, and it was a dad and a dad, you only listed one parent. Now the federal government has changed this for equality. If the parents are not married but live together, then both parents need to be listed on the FAFSA. Same-gendered parents, they both go on the FAFSA. Okay, it used to be that only one parent in these scenarios, only parent would be listed. So now there will be the choice of, in the question of marital status for the parent, it'll say unmarried and both parents are living together. This would be your marital status. What do we use to determine the family's expected family contribution, the EFC? The most important things on these applications for us is the income of the custodial parent and the student, the assets of the custodial parent and the student, and the number of family members in the household, as well as the number of children that are in college, and the age of older parent. So the reason for the age of older parent is if we have a parent that's 60 years old, there's the possibility that the parent may retire at 65, and so they have less years for the ability to earn income. Whereas if the parent is 45 years old, they have a longer time to have the ability to earn income. So that's why the age of the older parent makes a difference, because the older the parent, the more income gets protected. The younger the parent, the less income gets protected to determine the financial contribution from the family. Now, the difference between, I want to point out here that home, retirement, and business assets are protected in the federal analysis. So on the FAFSA, you're not going to report the home that you live in as an asset. That's specifically on the FAFSA. That is not true for the CSS profile. That's one of the main reasons, one of the main differences between both of these applications. The CSS profile will go into very detailed questions about your finances, including your home and your retirement assets. Whereas the FAFSA does not require you to provide information about the worth or the value of your home or the worth or the value of your business if you have less than 100 employees. Or the worth and the value of your retirement assets that are specifically in retirement accounts. Now, the CSS profile will ask for that information. The CSS profile is going to private institutions that obviously cost more, and they're looking more at what is the complete resource of the family. Okay, state schools obviously cost less, so they're only looking at very small specific information to determine the family's contribution. But private schools, are awarding their own funds from their institutions, so they're looking at the entire resource of the family. Now, however, from that, for example, at Occidental, we don't use, even though it's reported, we don't use the family's, the parents' retirement assets to count into the calculation. That's something that we choose not to use. Okay, your retirement money is your retirement money. Now, I can't speak for all private institutions. It depends if they use it or not. So that's something else to look into. A lot of families come back to us and say, well, your financial aid award is very different to USC's. How did they come up with, this, and you came up with this, and it's just, everybody uses a different calculation.
I have a question.
Yes.
Two things. One, is there a way to ascertain what criterion is used by the different schools since it can swing so wildly? That's my first question. And the second question is a little red. My husband passed away, so the question of the age of the older parent. My husband was 10 years older than me. Does my daughter put down when he was her older parent?
No, it would just be, when there's a deceased, parent, then it would only be the information of the parent that the student lives with at the time. Yeah, and then your question about how do you figure out what the colleges use or don't use, there isn't really a way, unless you really speak to them and say, do you use this, do you use that, do you take this into account, and ask and sit down with someone and ask those specific questions. But it'll come from seeing the differences between the awards that the student may receive. Obviously not taking merit scholarships into account, because merit scholarships have nothing to do with this. Merit scholarships come from usually the admissions office based on the student's ability as a student and leadership and so forth. So that wouldn't come into play, but it's just sitting down and talking to someone and trying to figure out what they use and what they don't use. Okay, so when you complete your FAFSA, I'm going to give you homework for tonight. You need to get a PIN. Okay, it's a 4-digit number, and that basically serves as your signature on the FAFSA. So one parent needs to have a PIN, and the student needs to have a PIN. It's a 4-digit number that serves kind of like your Social Security number, even though you are going to be using your Social Security number on the FAFSA. But the reason why I say that it's like a Social Security number, that PIN is specific to that person who takes out the PIN. And it's also the gateway to a lot of information. So you want to make sure you keep it safe. okay? And you're going to be using this pen every time you submit the FAFSA. And in most cases, if you're receiving financial aid, you're going to be resubmitting the FAFSA every year so that the student can obtain those federal or state funds every year. And I'm still using my PIN for 2 reasons. One, to pay back my $50,000 loans that I took out during college, which I only owe $2,000. Yay! So I check my account just to see how it's going down. I get a really happy, I get a rush every time I look at that. And I also use it for work. I work with the Department of Education in some sense. We get federal funds, so I use my PIN to identify myself as the person who's obtaining this information for the students. So that's why I say that the PIN is you have to be very careful with that it doesn't get lost or that you don't give it to someone else, that it's just like a number that's floating around. And you can, as a parent, you can use this number for your other children, if you have younger children that are going to be using the FAFSA. So that is your signature. It's like your social security number, okay? So you can use it. If you ever lose it on the website, there's a way to retrieve it, okay? So if you say, oh, I remember getting one, but I don't remember what it is, go back on the website, pin.ed.gov, and retrieve your PIN if you know you had one. All right, so some common errors that families make while applying for financial aid. One is that they provide inaccurate or incomplete data on the FAFSA. I had a parent one time say they submitted an income of about, $200,000 family income. And when they got a tentative financial aid offer, because we're going off of the information that the family is giving us, so we're making offers based off that. And then when the tax returns came in, the parent made $700,000. And I said, okay, I asked the parent, I said, was this your income last year too, or was it just like an anomaly? They said, no, this is my income. And I said, well, why did you put 200? He's like, well, because the rest of the money goes to bills and this and that and other. I'm like, no. You have to report your income, what you make, on your tax returns. This is it's not what you think you'll have to pay for college. So I'm giving, it's a very, I think you would all know better to do that. But, I'm just giving you an example of, what not to do. You also want to make sure you have the accurate household information and number of college. That does make a difference because we're saying, in this household of 5, there's 2 in college. So in general, when, for example, say on your first child, you're expected to contribute $30,000 towards college, let's just say. Second year comes around, your first child is now a sophomore, and you have an incoming freshman to a school as well. So now you have 2 in college. So what will happen in general is that your contribution will still be $30,000, but now it'll be between the two students. Okay, so it'll be 15 and 15 in general. That's just a very rough estimate, but that's the basic idea of how. When you have 2 or 3 in college, you still have the same contribution, but it just gets divided up, okay? So it's a good thing when you have kids one after another.
Excuse me,
Yes.
does that include graduate school, or is it just
Graduate school is very different. So some colleges will allow certain graduate programs, other colleges will not. The reason being is because when you're a graduate student, you're considered independent. Because at this point, you've received a bachelor's degree, and so there are different types of financial aid programs for them. And certain schools will only allow graduate students if they go to medical school or law school. The reason being is because parents still have to submit their financial information when those students apply to those schools. Parents are still being counted. Whereas if they go get their PhD in English literature, they're considered independent. Therefore, it's only their financial information that's being counted, not the parents anymore. So that's the main difference. Okay? Yes?
Do you have to reapply every year?
Yes, you reapply every year using The FAFSA in some schools, if you're going private, will require that you do the CSS profile every year. Some schools will not. At Occidental, we require the FAFSA every year, but we don't require the CSS profile every year. We have our own paper form for families. So every year you will be submitting. If you are receiving financial aid every year, you'll be reapplying. Yes?
If parents have joint legal and joint physical custody, do you have the option of choosing which parent will be the custodial parent versus the FAFSA?
In general, if both parents have legal custody, joint custody, the way that we think about it is, okay, who does the student live with the most? So the question being is, who is supporting this student the most financially? Okay, so if one parent is supporting the student the most financially, then that's the parent that gets reported on those applications. Sometimes, families come back to us and say, well, it is 50-50. It's 50-50, we both do it. They're here, they're there, they come and back and forth. Then you would put the information, then the custodial parent in this case would be the parent that earns the most income. So that's how that gets divided up. All right, we'll go on. Special circumstances. In the case that, and it happens a lot, with the recession that's happened in the past couple of years, we've seen so many families go through this. They had a very successful business, they had successful jobs, careers. All of a sudden it comes, closer to the time for the student to start school and a parent gets laid off. And you've already committed to the college, you're gonna be contributing $30,000 and you were fine before you lost that job, but now you lost that job. So what you need to do is you need to communicate with the college and even if it's before that time where you made your decision, it's important to communicate to colleges any special circumstances that's happening with you. Maybe, you probably think, well, I look good on paper, I look good on tax returns, it looks like I'm making good money, but we have this going on. My mom now has breast cancer and we're paying a lot of out-of-pocket for medical bills that's not being covered by insurance. This is a special circumstance. A parent gets married or divorced. There's all sorts of types of circumstances. A parent gets furloughed. Any of that is a special circumstance. And so what I would advise you to do is, if you know this ahead of time, then write a letter and send it to all of the colleges, the financial aid offices that you're applying to, okay, your special circumstance. If it happens after you committed to the college, then speak to them. I would set up either a phone appointment or an in-person appointment, if that's a possibility, to speak to someone and ask them, what's the best way to approach this? What can I expect? What can I do to give you more information to hopefully take this into account? So every school will be very different. I know from what I went through, at a public institution, a special circumstance is very hard to get through to someone. I remember making lines at Murphy Hall at UCLA in order to be able to talk to a financial aid counselor. Whereas in smaller institutions, it's very easy to make that one-on-one appointment. But it's very important that you communicate in some way to the institution about any hardship that's happening financially.
Do you do that after the kid's been accepted, or?
I would do that from the beginning. As soon as you know that something's going on, that you don't look as good as it looks like on the paper, you start sending out those letters to the financial aid offices that your child's applying to, so that they have that in record.
Does indicating need adversely affect acceptance, given that some schools may not meet 100% of need, that they're going to look at it and say, well, this kid needs a lot of help, so.
Yeah, I understand your question, and the question there would be, how is the school need aware? In our case, we're need aware, and the best way I can explain it to you is 80% of the class gets submitted without us looking at anything financially. 80% of the class. 20% of the class, then we have to start looking at, can we afford this student? Okay, so that's the bottom 20%. So at that point, the admissions office starts making decisions not only about the student, but about the student financially. What's it going to cost to the college? Because obviously we don't want to admit a student that we can't offer this financial aid package to, that they'll be able to come here. So that is being need aware. Some schools, you've probably heard the term, need blind. You know, these schools, it doesn't matter. They're going to admit the 100% of the class, not thinking, not looking at any of the financial information. But those are some things that you can start looking into the schools that you're applying to. Good question. All right. So, where does financial aid funds come from? They come from the federal government, so federal and state government. So federal funds and state funds come from the federal government, and that information gets to us by the information you submit on the FAFSA. Okay, so you are eligible for these funds based on submitting your FAFSA on time. Post-secondary institutions, so the schools themselves have their own scholarships, and that amount of money is based on obviously the financial applications as well. And private agencies, so that happens, you know, either from the church, a Rotary Club, a Coles scholarship. I mean, there's all sorts of scholarships, and these are private, what we call outside scholarships, and we'll be talking a little bit about that further down the line. So what are the types of financial aid? First is scholarships and grants. Anything that has that name attached to it is gift money. It's free money that you do not have to repay back. However, you do want to make sure that, you know, are there any requirements to receive the scholarships or grants? Do I need to maintain a certain GPA? Do I need to do certain community services every year? Do I need to do a special project for this every year? Do I need to submit a transcript for this every year? So those are the types of things you have to look into when you receive a scholarships. Do they have any requirement? Then there's what we call self-help aid. And self-help aid consists of loans and employment. So we also call the program Work Study Program. So here's the difference of what we call need-based aid and non-need-based aid. So need-based aid, you're offered these programs if you have need. After you submit your applications, you show that you have need based on your family's financial information. Work programs, loan programs that are specific to needy students, grants and scholarships programs. Now, non-need based is merit scholarships. Merit scholarships have usually nothing to do with parents' financial information. Now, that is the case for our school, but I've heard of other schools that do require financial information for merit scholarships because they're looking for students in specific underrepresented or socioeconomic levels for those specific merit scholarships.
Gina?
Yes.
If you know for sure that you cannot qualify for the FAFSA and you just care for the merit scholarship, do we still need to do that?
No, if you're only looking to be awarded merit scholarships, then usually you don't have to submit any of the financial applications.
What about a CSS profile?
Usually not. You don't have to submit any of the financial applications if you're looking for merit-based aid. However, I would look at the websites of the schools just because, like I said, some scholarships are determined by socioeconomic levels for different reasons.
What about Oxy?
At Occidental College, merit scholarships are determined by the admissions office, and it has nothing to do with their financial information. Okay? And then also non-need-based is what we called unsubsidized loans. Unsubsidized, I'll go into this a little bit further down the line, but it has to do with loans that students can receive that don't have a subsidy, which means that the interest starts accruing as soon as the money hits their account. And PLUS loans, these are loans for parents. It's called, PLUS stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. It's a federal loan that parents can take out. And I'll talk about the PLUS loans further down the line. Okay, so in the case of scholarships or need-based aid for scholarships, The amounts vary by the colleges. I mean, we have students with, $49,000 scholarships and $1,000 scholarships. So the amounts vary depending on the situation of the family. Need-based federal grant money, there's 2 grant programs currently. There's the federal Pell Grant, and those are for very needy students, as well as the federal SEOG grant. The maximum this past year that a student could receive in a Pell Grant was $56.45 and $4,000 for the FSEOG. For state grants, in a community college, usually the fees are waived for community colleges based on a state grant that the student may be eligible to receive. And in a Cal Grant, it usually at a Cal State and a UC, it pays for the fees in most cases. At an independent institution such as Occidental, all the private institutions, USC, the maximum this year for a Cal Grant was $9,084, so $9,084. That's why it's really important to submit the Cal Grant information. And I'm going to explain the Cal Grant a little bit further down the line, how to qualify for that. Yes, so this is the Cal Grant information. So this is for this current academic year. They still haven't given us the information for the 14-15 academic year. But in the case of a Cal Grant A, you need to have a 3.0 or above verified by the school. And for a family of 4, your income can not be any greater than $83,100. That's for a family of 4 to qualify for Cal Grant A or C. Cal Grant C is for community colleges, and Cal Grant A is usually for private institutions. Cal Grant B is usually what students receive at Cal States and UCs. And if for a family of 4, for Cal Grant B, you need to have a 2.0 or above and have your income be $43,700 or less. And your assets cannot be any greater than $64,300. That's not including your home. That's just stocks, bonds, money saved, real estate, property. That's not your home. Yes, sir?
Is that income ceiling or floor, is that the gross or the modified adjusted?
It's adjusted gross income plus any untaxed income. Okay? So untaxed income could be money that you put aside for your retirement account that year. That's considered untaxed income. Okay?
What about Social Security?
No, not Social Security. Okay?
So Gina, based on a family of 4, let's say that if you make over 83,000, so that's a good sign that you're not going to be qualified for the FSA, correct?
No, so his question was 83,100, family of 4, that's a good indicator that you're not going to qualify for financial aid. No, that's not true. This is the qualifications for the Cal Grant only, okay? Not for financial aid in general. This is just Cal Grant. This is from the state, okay? Yes, sir.
For the private institutions, that the AC.
I'm sorry?
And for the private institutions.
Yeah, so private institutions, in general, it would be the Cal Grant A. So it would be a 3.0 or above, and a family of 4 would be 83,100. UCs, usually they take Cal Grant B, and for a family of 4, it'd be 2.0 or above at 43,700, okay, based on this calculator. So in January, February, you can start looking to Cal Grant ceilings for 2014, 2015 if you're interested in looking to see what the new ceilings are, and you can Google that and find it easily.
The GPA, is that the 4 years or?
The GPA is based on how the counselors are determining it. That's what they're submitting, the GPA verification form. That's where that comes from. I'm not entirely sure how they calculate that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. What's the definition of a family? The household, whoever's in the home. It's the whole household size. It's whatever you're putting on the FAFSA as household size. Okay? This is specifically for Cal Grants, so I would not take this as this, I'm not going to qualify for any, this is specifically for Cal Grants, State of California scholarships, where the student needs to attend a California institution and meet these requirements. This is not for financial aid, believe me. Okay, those incomes are very low. Okay, so please do not get discouraged by that. Yes.
You had spoken about writing special circumstance letters to financial aid departments. How is there an appeals process for Cal Grant to sort of explain special circumstance?
Good luck. Yeah, it's the state of California. I have no idea. Yeah, good luck with that. Sorry, it's not, I mean, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. I've heard of appeals for students that forgot to submit their GPA verification form and they appealed for whatever reason. I mean, we had 2 students from one high school, and it happened to be my alma mater, which I was really embarrassed about. The counselor forgot to submit the GPA verification forms, so these kids were out of luck from that Cal Grant. And many institutions, if they're coming to a California school, will say, you meet the qualifications for a Cal Grant, and if you're not coming in with that money, we're not going to make it up for you. So these kids were running into that, that scenario. So a lot of schools will say that. So that's why that, I mean, it's, as you can see, at a private institution, it's $9,000. It's a lot of money. So those students fortunately appealed to the state of California, and they saw that it was a school error, not the student's error, and they received their Cal Grants. But it was a very long time, and there was a very arduous fight between the students and the system, basically. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Gina, obviously I'll come back here. One thing, can we tell our students year after year when we give them transcripts, check their social security number? And on March 1st, they come in and go, or March 3rd, something, I just realized my social security number is wrong. Okay, we remind them for 4 years that it's crucial that you make sure that your student is started out their social security number is their own, and that it is correct on their transcript, because that is not correctable after March 2nd.
Okay, good to know. All right, so the other thing that you need to be, in order to qualify for these Cal Grants, is to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, and also to be a resident of California and attend a California institution for that year, okay? There's also what we call the California DREAM Act. This is for students that are not eligible citizens, and in order to receive funds from the state or the federal government, actually it's the federal government, they must at least have attended a California high school for 3 full years and have graduated from a California high school, and also to sign an affidavit saying that they are going to pursue becoming legal residents of the state in the long run. Now, merit scholarships. So many colleges offer these merit scholarships based on the student's academic and leadership qualities, and schools have different ways of determining those merit scholarships. Sometimes they require a separate essay. Sometimes their admissions applications is the way that they determine these merit scholarships. So it just depends on the school and what their requirements are. And then also, if the student does receive a merit scholarship, make sure you understand how they can renew this scholarship every year. Do they need to maintain a certain GPA? Do they need to do some type of service for the school? Yes, sir.
These scholarships we're talking about, can they be applied for after the student is admitted, or should students be applying for these individual scholarships concurrently with their application to school? You don't know they're going to get it?
Yeah, so I mean, I can speak for Occidental. Their admissions application serves as their application for a merit scholarship, but some schools do require a separate essay or a separate application for these merit scholarships. So they should be completing these as they are applying to be admitted to these schools. Okay?
Gina, for Oxy, what kind of GPA is required?
For what kind of GPA is required for merit scholarships? You know, I honestly don't know, because I don't work for the admissions office, and that's something that they handle. But I know that they don't there are some scholarships where they don't look at GPAs. I know that they look at leadership qualities. You know, maybe they weren't the straight A student, but they were tremendous leaders in their community or in their school, and so they received the leadership scholarship. I don't think that there is a cutoff per se, but I think that there's different attributes to each of the scholarships established by the school. Now, outside scholarships. These are scholarships awarded to students from outside agencies, just, you know, your church. Sometimes the schools have award ceremony at the end, and they have scholarships here as well. Rotary Club, you know, Gates Millennium Scholars, all sorts of scholarship. Now, they're very competitive, and a lot of the time students get very discouraged because they don't receive these scholarships. But one of the things that students need to think about when they're doing outside scholarship is how is it going to impact their award from the school. So a lot of the times, I'll give you what we do. In our scholarship policy is that, say for example, the student has $30,000 in financial aid, $10,000 being from a loan. Let's just say $10,000 is a loan from the school, and $20,000 is from the school's scholarship. Okay, so they get a $5,000 scholarship from Coca-Cola, and what we will do is we will reduce the student's loan. So now they have $5,000 loan, $5,000 in an outside scholarship, and $20,000 from the institution scholarship. Some schools, what they do is that they reduce their own scholarship, a portion of their scholarship, and then a portion of their loan. They'll say, oh, 75% will reduce the loan, and 25% will reduce a scholarship that we're awarding them. So that's a good question to ask or to check into if you know that your student's going to be receiving an outside scholarship, to know how they treat the outside scholarship. And then also there's scholarship search engines, FastWeb, College Answer. These are good scholarship engines. However, I've heard a lot of students get discouraged from these websites just because they get too much information. They get information, they put in their information saying, I'm a redheaded person that writes with my left hand and I twirl the baton with my right hand. So, you know, it's just giving them information about themselves, and then these engines spit back information like, oh, you can apply for this scholarship for people who are redheaded. You can apply for this scholarship for people who are left-handed. They get tons of notifications. And so a lot of the students say, you know, they get very overwhelmed with all of the emails that they're receiving from these search engines. So what I've told students to do is to open up or use an email account where they won't be so overwhelmed with these scholarships information coming in, that, you know, they check occasionally, that, you know, they don't need to do a day-to-day thing. Because one of the important things about your email address is whatever email address you put in on the FAFSA for student's email address and parent email address, that's the email address where the schools will be contacting the student or the parent for, you know, any information coming from the school. A lot of the times, you know, when we get information about families' finances that we don't understand, like, oh, something is not making sense, or it looks like they made a mistake, but I need to clarify, we will email the family using those email addresses. And so it's important once you submit your application that you're checking it constantly, just so that you're on top of it and not delaying your financial information being looked at because we haven't gotten a response yet. So it's something that you want to keep up with. And I mean, there's a lot of scamming options out there with these scholarships. You know, a lot of them will advertise saying, we'll get you the best financial aid package. We, you know, guarantee 100% that you'll get the best award. Basically what these companies do is that they'll charge you $1,500 to complete your FAFSA and a one-on-one meeting with them. So when I was in high school, I fell for it. I went. It was a meeting at a hotel. It was the Hilton. I was like, ooh, the Hilton. Okay, so it must be, you know, pretty legal or whatever. And I went and signed the form, and I met with someone, and they sat down with me and they filled out the FAFSA for me, and then they said, okay, we'll send back your information. You know, we'll let you know if anything comes up. And then I just wasn't hearing from them, and then I read the fine print, and it said, this is what we do. We fill out the FAFSA for you, and we answer any questions you may have. And you have 30 days to cancel this. So I called them and made sure I canceled it because it was a total scam. So make sure that if you do receive anything, that you check with your counselors. You know, they'll probably know which one is a scam and which one seems legit. Okay? Yes?
I was saying that if the student gets a scholarship, that some of the schools, instead of being thankful that they hustled and went out and really worked on those scholarships, they would actually hold that against them and then deduct it for whenever you said this. All of it, since some schools actually do that.
What I'm saying is by federal regulations, you need to report any scholarships the students are receiving to the college. That's a federal regulation. Everything that the student receives for college needs to be accounted for. The college will create their own policy on how these outside scholarships are used. A lot of colleges, you know, some colleges will say their thinking process is they don't have a very large endowment. I'll just be very honest. They don't have a very large endowment, so they're saying the less in scholarship that we can give this student that's getting an outside scholarship, the more we have to give to someone else. You're already receiving this. You were receiving it in the first place. Let's pick a little and give it to someone else who can use it. That's basically what they're doing. They're not doing it to be evil. I mean, they're doing it to help out as many students as possible. But just be aware that that can happen.
Right, but I'm saying that the student is really hustling because they know, well, that's my parents' money. That's not my money, so this scholarship is now in pay so their parents can have their retirement and have their lives run together. It means nothing to the child. So why would they do that if the child is going to go get it, they are to find every possible scholarship to help them pay their own college?
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I can't respond to that because that's not, I mean, we replace their loan, but I can't speak for other colleges that may do that. So, I mean, the way that I explained it in terms of, you know, picking a little to give to someone else, that's their thought process behind that. So I totally understand that the student is the one hustling and it's their money and they should be able to use it how they want to use it, but unfortunately these are federal regulations and it's whatever school policy. So of course, when trying to figure out, you know, what school you're going to go to, that's one of the important questions to ask if the student is bringing in a lot of outside scholarships. Definitely. Okay, so another type of financial aid program, which is actually one of my favorites, is a work-study program. The work-study program is a federal program where the federal government subsidizes a portion of the federal program. The other part comes from the college, so the college and the federal government are combining their funds to pay for the student to work at the college or the campus or to work as a student. So work-study jobs are very different depending on the college campus. At Occidental, you know, they have to work on campus. There's working in the cafeteria, working in the library, working in the financial aid office, working in specific departments, working with campus safety. There's all sorts of jobs. At a private institution, like when I was at UCLA, I had a work-study job where my job was to answer the phone for the bookie at the Whiskey A Go-Go on the Sunset Strip. Okay? I know, yeah. I was very interested in the entertainment business, and so that was a job opportunity that I saw that, you know, I'd either love it or hate it, and I ended up hating it. But it was there, and it gave me the opportunity to explore that type of environment. But like I said, you know, every school is different. And so there's different jobs on different campuses. So one of the great things about work-study programs is that it gives the opportunity for the students to meet people outside of, you know, their friends. We have work-study students that work in our office, and we love them to death. You know, they're our kids, and we watch out for them. And first and foremost, they're students. So that's why it's the difference between working, you know, using their work-study money versus working and working outside of campus. You know, maybe they're working at the Target down the street. The Target down the street is not going to care that the student has a meeting for midterms with their professors at 7 o'clock, but they also have to work at the same time. They're going to be like, you need to figure out what you're going to do, but you have these hours that you need to work. Whereas they come to us and we're like, you know what, go, that's fine. You're here as a student, that's what your job is first and foremost, so go do what you need to do. There's also the ability they learn how to manage their time better. If they have, you know, they'll be like, okay, well, I have this 2-hour opening between classes, so I'm going to schedule working during that time, and then I'll go to class, and my class is just, you know, a couple buildings from there, and so they can manage their time better versus if they just, you know, they have classes, and then, you know, they're hanging out with their friends in the middle of it, and then they go to class, and so there is a lot of studies saying that they learn to manage their time a lot better if they work using work study. There's also, you know, they're creating their resume. They're, you know, learning, they're expanding. One of our work study students, he was graduating, and a coworker of mine is good friends with somebody who works for the Los Angeles Opera. And when he graduated, you know, this person was able to help him obtain a job at the Los Angeles Opera. So it also opens you up to getting to know different people and maybe job opportunities later down the line. And also they're learning how to manage their money. You know, that they're getting paid, so they're working, and every 2 weeks they'll get their paycheck, and they're learning how to pay for their own stuff. You know, that's what their personal expenses are for. They're paying that with this type of money for their personal expenses. Yes, sir? Yeah, the student has to find their own job. They don't get assigned something. It's like looking for a job. You don't have to change every year. I mean, we hire students, and sometimes, you know, we hire them as a freshman. They stay with us throughout all 4 years. I worked, when I was at UCLA, I worked at another position all throughout my 4 years. So it just depends what the job opening is, if it's temporary or if it's a long-term position. Usually offices will tend to want to teach a person how to do that job and doesn't want to lose it because they don't want to retrain somebody. So they want, obviously, students to come back the next years.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since we're talking about financial aid, when does this come to the equation? Because it's after you've been accepted, right? Then you join the work-study program when you're going to school.
Work-study will be offered to the student if they're eligible for it in the award letter.
Oh, in the award letter?
In the award letter, if they're eligible for it, will come work-study.
Okay.
Yeah. Was there a question in the back? Yes.
I think that was my question is, who is eligible for that? What's the base?
It's work-study is a need-based program, so it usually we determine eligibility based off of the FAFSA because it is a federal program. Okay, loans. This is the example specific to the academic year of 2013-2014, okay? So the first couple of types of loans are the subsidized Stafford direct loans. And this year, the interest rate on these loans is 3.86%. These are student loans. They do not need co-signers. They're federal loans that are offered to the student. For a freshman, the maximum that they can receive is $3,500, $3,500. And the other thing that I have to tell you is that last year, or the summer before the academic year 13-14 started, this loan was supposed to be at 6.8%. In August, the federal government said, wait, stop the presses before you process anything. These loans are coming down to 3.86% because of the student debt crisis. The year before that, it was at 3.4%, but it was supposed to be at 3.68%. Now, we don't know, the reason why I'm not giving you what are the figures for next year is that we don't know what's going to happen. It could that they can say one thing and then all of a sudden, right before school starts, they change it on us. So there's no way for us to know. But the highest I've seen these student loans be is 6.8%. So
This is fixed, or is it?
this is a fixed amount for that year's specific loan, okay? The unsubsidized loan, ever since I can remember, it was at 6.8%. But this year, miracle, they changed it to 3.86%. Now the difference between these two loans, subsidized and unsubsidized, is that word, subsidized and unsubsidized. Subsidized loan means that the federal government is paying for the interest while the student is in school. Okay, no interest is being accrued on that loan as long as the student is in school. Unsubsidized means that the interest is accruing as soon as the money hits the account. Okay? So, also both of these loans, they are repayable back once the student graduates from school. So, if they go to graduate school, they can do what's called an in-school deferment, which means to put a hold on paying back their loans until they're out of school. Now the subsidized loan, again, the interest will be subsidized as long as the student is in school. The unsubsidized loan, it is accruing interest, okay? The Perkins loan is also a federal loan that has a 5% interest. I've known this loan to be at 5% ever since I can remember. I had a Perkins loan. And it's also a federal loan. Now the federal government it's currently a subsidized program, which means the federal government is paying for the interest while the student is in school, but there are talks down the grapevine that they want to make it an unsubsidized program. So I don't think it'll happen next year, but it is in the talks. Yes, ma'am, back there. The maximum for, so say for example, the subsidized amount is $3,500 for a freshman, but say and then that freshman gets $3,500 subsidized and then can get $2,000 unsubsidized. That's a freshman, okay? Now say for example, because the subsidized loan is a need-based program, the student does not qualify for that need-based subsidized loan. That means that freshman then can get the total of $5,500 unsubsidized. So it's a combination of the $35,000 plus the $2,000, okay? The Perkins loan, it's determined by the school. Basically what they do is they give the school a lump sum of money, and the school then has the ability to manage these funds however they see fit. And it's based off school policy, how they award these funds.
Is it fixed again?
It's fixed at 5%, yeah. Now the parent loan, this is a loan for parents. The parents have the ability to take out as much as needed to pay for the cost of the child's education with a PLUS loan. Now say you get no financial aid whatsoever, and if it costs $63,000, you can take out a $63,000 loan. I do have parents taking out that much money in loans. It's at 6.4% this academic year. Last academic year before that, it was at 7.2. Actually, no, sorry, 7.9%. So it came down, which I'm very surprised because ever since I can remember, it was at 7.9%.
Is that fixed?
It's a fixed.
And regardless of a credit?
So the PLUS loan is a credit-based loan. The Department of Education will check the credit of the parent borrower. If in the case that a parent gets denied for this loan, they then have a couple of different choices. One is to get an endorser, so somebody to endorse this loan for you. It can be anybody to endorse this loan. It cannot be the student, though. But anybody can endorse this loan, and they would then check the credit of that endorser. Or the student can take out more money in the unsubsidized loan program. But it wouldn't be that much more. It would be only maybe about $5,000 more. So if you're looking to take out a $63,000 plus loan and you get denied and you want to do more unsubsidized money, it would only be $5,000. It wouldn't be the 63. Okay, you could only get the 63 if you get denied and then get an endorser. And colleges do have their own loan programs. Most of the public institutions will not, but some of the private institutions will have their own loan programs. And for example, at Occidental, we have an interest-free loan for California residents. And it's also based on need. So it just depends on the family's eligibility. But their own colleges may have their own loan programs. And so remember, with loans, it is money that needs to be paid back. And repayment usually begins after the student has finished their education. And only borrow what is needed. I have a lot of students that are just saying yes to that loan without really even thinking about it. So what I do in order to give them another step to think about it is I say, you need to actively accept it. There are some schools that will automatically accept the loan programs if they don't hear a denial from the student of, no, I don't want this loans. I make them accept this loan because I want them to think about what they're doing in terms of taking out this money. Do they really need it? The other part about loans, I know a lot of parents, seem to try to stay away from loans from the students. They say, I do not want my kid to be in debt after they come out of school, and that's why I saved up a lot of money, and I want to make sure that they come out of this debt-free. One of the things that I push towards, I say, okay, that's fine. You don't want to have a lot of debt. And if you are able to afford to not have them take out loans, then that's good. But allow them to take out at least a small portion of loans for two reasons. One, they're investing in their own future. Okay? They're understanding the value of their education. It's their way to put their, foot forward of their own education. And number two, what do they want to buy after they get out of college? A car, yes. And what do they need to have that car in their name? Credit, yeah. This is a good way to start establishing good credit. A Macy's card is not going to do that. As you know, a Macy's card is a revolving credit, and sometimes it's not looked good at on your credit accounts. But an education loan is looked at as good credit. Yes?
You say only borrow what is needed, but what about loans that are offered as part of the financial aid package in colleges? Do they come in certain amounts?
Yeah, so those loans that I was talking about, the subsidized, unsubsidized, those all come on the packages that colleges offer. Those will be, the amounts and the types of loans will all be detailed in that award letter.
Say we should take care in terms of what we borrow through those, or is that through additional sources?
No, through those as well. I mean, when you get an award letter, you want to look at, and that's actually what we're going into. When you get an award letter, you want to look at what are they offering me in terms of financial aid and what is the cost of the college. Compare both of them. What can the family then, maybe they're saying that your expected family contribution is $10,000, but you can afford to pay a little bit more. So maybe they don't need to take out that $5,000 loan. You can afford to pay $15,000 because they have, you have some savings that you're willing to tap into and, do that. So that will all come together in that award letter. And so you want to compare apples to apples in terms of cost and what are you getting in financial aid.
So you can partake selectively.
Yes.
Of the offer.
Yes, you can definitely say, of course you're going to say yes to the scholarship and grants, right? But in loans, you can deny any type of loan that's offered to you. You don't have to take it. And for the majority, it'll be student loans that will be offered, so the student will be the one that will actively need to deny or accept the loan, okay? But some schools do it differently. So when you receive your financial aid award letter, and some schools, the smaller schools will put in their admissions packet and their financial aid award letter together. Like at Occidental, we put everything together. Bigger institutions, things will come separately. So make sure you look out for both packets, if that's the case. And always remember that biggest award letter is not always the best. You need to see what is the unmet need. What is the cost of the school minus what you're being offered in financial aid. A lot of people think that what they're being offered in financial aid is what is the cost of the school. So you need to make sure you learn and educate yourself about what is exactly the cost of school, and that cost of attendance, what does it entail? Is it tuition? What are all the other extras in that cost of attendance? Like we were talking about earlier before, transportation, so for example, transportation costs for someone here going to Occidental, maybe there's $300 in there. You may not use that $300 or need that $300 of transportation. It's just like for budgeting purposes. So start to look at, what are the costs and what's the financial aid. Is the full cost of education realistic? Can the family afford to do this? Every year I meet with families that are trying so hard to get their kid to come to the school, and I can see it. I can see their struggle, and they're not going to be able to do it. And I'm completely honest with them. I tell them, I think this is going to be a very hard spot for you, and I think you really need to sit down and think about it, because it would be horrible if you say yes to your child, go, and then the next year, you can't afford it, and you need to pull them out, and they need to get transferred, and it's just, it's horrible. So it does happen from time to time, so you really need to think about it as a 4 or 5 year commitment. It's not just, what can we do for that year? You need to take a look at what is the loan balance. Which school is offering you more loans versus less loan? And what are the terms and conditions of the loan offered? Can you get this loan next year? Will that loan be there for you next year? Will this scholarship be there for you next year? Is it a need-based loan? If it's a need-based loan, then it's going to be calculated based on your financial situation. So if you made less money in the year that we're looking at and going to make more money in the following year, then you know that your scholarship will probably reduce if it's a need-based loan. So every year, by you submitting your FAFSA and your financial aid applications, we're going to be re-looking at the family's financial information, so things may change. Yes, ma'am?
So does that mean your expected family contribution changes every year then?
Yes.
So if you have money saved in a college account, let's say, will they take all that, but you don't have enough for the whole time, will they take all that the first year?
No. Okay, let me give you an example. So say, for example, and I'm going to take student assets into the perspective here. Say, for example, the student has a UGMA, a Uniform Gift to Minors account, and they have, $100,000 in that account. And so they're going to list it as part of their asset. Now, student assets are weighted a lot heavier than parent assets, because student assets, based on these applications, students' assets are there to pay for educational purposes, are there to pay for their college costs. So if for us, for example, it's a 4-year institution, we make sure that students graduate in 4 years, we will expect the student to contribute 25% of their assets each year. So by the time that, if they have $100,000, they'll be expected to contribute $25,000 of that every year. So by the time they finish, it'll be gone. That's not the same for parents, though. Parents' assets are weighted a lot less. It can be anywhere, depending on family's income, but it could be anywhere between 5% to 12% of what their assets are sort of calculated as part of the contribution. And so student assets are weighted a lot heavier, okay? And then also just to make sure, 529 plans, if you have 529 plans for your children, they're reported, it's the only one that is reported under the parent assets, not under the student assets. Everything else, if it's under the student's name, Social Security number is attached to that account for the student, goes under the student. But if it's a 529, it gets reported under the parent's asset.
And that's for both FAFSA and CSS profile?
Both for both FAFSA and CSS profile. Yes? How does what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. An athletic scholarship is sort of It's unfamiliar territory for me because Oxy is third division, so we don't do athletic scholarships. But I believe that they handle it sort of like a merit scholarship. So this is what you're getting, and it's renewable, based on you completing these tasks for athlete. I'm sure they have their own requirements, but I believe they treat it sort of like a merit scholarship. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
How well do the schools, I mean, I guess you could just speak for Occidental, but do they negotiate, once you get your letters and you have several, stuff, what the school is going to do is what will you do?
Of course, yeah. Again, thank you. I can only speak for Occidental. We don't like the word negotiate. I will tell you that. So don't tell us that one. We like to sit down with families, and we talk about this is what your financial aid is, and the family then says, well, this is what we're looking at, and we say, okay, well, is there some other information that you haven't provided to us that maybe we can take a look at, re-look at the application? We really don't care for the offers of the other schools because this is what we've determined that the family can afford, and unless there's anything that you haven't already spoken to us about, then this is basically what it's going to be. We don't use I guess the carrot of another school like package to see if, oh, we'll beat yours. But I know that some schools do that. So, when you are visiting schools, have it with you and you say, would this be something that you're interested? They'll either say like, no, we don't really care. Or some schools will be interested and say, all right, show it to us, give us what other schools may have given you. Yes, ma'am.
When you are applying early decision, which of course is get in and go, is financial aid a reason to back out? Or can you, if you don't get the financial aid you need, how are you stuck? What do you do?
Yeah, early decision is very tricky. Early decision is basically a bonding contract. You're saying, when you apply early decision, you're saying, if I get into the school, I'm going here regardless of anything, regardless of my financial aid package, regardless of anything. So unless you're ready to write that $63,000 check, I wouldn't apply early decision. Just because if finances are a factor for you, then you're removing yourself from having options. When you're applying regular decisions, you can then lay out your options and see what works best for you, what's the best fit for the student, what's the best fit in terms of finances. I know a lot of the time students get pushed to apply early decision because of athletics, because of music. They're trying to figure out, do they have enough banjo players? Do they have enough football players with this particular thing? They're trying to make their team, and that's awesome and that's great. But if the family does have finances in mind, and that's a big thing, then I wouldn't do early decision. That's just my own advice coming from the financial aid office. Yes, ma'am.
I've been making a lot of phone calls about that very issue, and what I've found out, for whatever it's worth, is that if you get a financial aid award with an early decision acceptance that is below what you feel you still can afford, you can write a letter and petition out of it. It is the only way to get out of that binding contract. However, a lot of times you won't get your financial aid award until after it's too late to apply to other schools.
Okay. Yeah. That's very true. Yes, did you have a question?
I wondered that when the school considered scholarship and all that, and do they also consider like where you live, your living costs around the neighborhood? You can have somebody making like $100K a year, but if you live in the Beverly Hills, the living standard is much higher, so the energy cost is much higher. Do they put that into consideration or they don't?
The calculations do have it built in the state that you live in, because obviously somebody from California, Hawaii, New York, Washington, D.C., like all those areas have a very higher cost of living. So those calculations are built in it. But I honestly don't think it makes big of a difference because it's something that's calculated by the federal government. and it's very outdated. So it makes a little bit of a difference, but I don't think the difference you would like it to make. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we definitely understand that portion of it. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to make sure that I touched upon too about the types of financial aid is if you are considering taking a heavy amount of loan to attend the school, you need to start thinking about, what are the students' career objectives and work expectations. So if the student is hoping to go to law school or medical school one day, scholarships are very hard to come by for those types of professions, and a lot of it has to be paid with loans. So if they're already taking out a very high amount in undergraduate and then going to be taking out higher amounts in loans for those professions, it's something that you have to start thinking about. Am I going to be able to pay it back? And that's when a lot of students run into trouble about repaying back their loans. They're not making, and I've seen it happen even at Occidental, they're not making wise decisions about how much they're taking on in loans. And usually when they come and talk to me about it, I'm very upfront with them. And I say, you're taking this much in loan, let's plug it into the calculator. This is how much you would have to pay back. Can you afford that? Oh, I'm sure I'll be able to afford it. I'm going to be a lawyer. And a lot of students, you've heard, they've been having a hard time finding jobs or finding the job that they were hoping to get once they came out of college, and they have to start, getting paid not as well as they thought they would. So you just kind of have to think ahead and make your decisions based on, looking ahead in the future. Okay, so one of the things that I think we kind of already touched upon it was that you need to ask the question of what type of need does the school meet? Does it meet 100%? Does it meet 75%? Does it meet 50%? I've never heard of anybody meeting 50%, but it's valid questions to make because institutions will award money to the students, but there's also, it depends on the availability of funds. I've heard, and I know of a lot of students and families try to do this every year. They, at the beginning, say that they're not interested for financial aid, so they apply to the college saying that they're not interested in financial aid, and they accept to come to our school, and then right before school starts, they say, well, we are actually interested in applying for financial aid. And we don't ask any questions, and we can say, okay, submit your information, and we'll see what type of federal aid you may be eligible for. But in terms of institutional money, we've already expended as much as we could for this academic year. So we don't have any funding, and now the family is caught, we can't afford it. And so, I think you need to be honest from the very beginning. If you want to apply for financial aid, then you need to make that specific designation of, yes, I want to apply for financial aid, because as before, I explained that we are a need-aware school, so you want to make sure that you answer truthfully to all these questions regarding financial aid. One of the more important things that happened in the past 3 years is that the federal government required all schools to have on their website what's called a net price calculator, an NPC. And every school has this. It's a net price calculator, and you put in your information, kind of like you're submitting a financial aid application, and in the end, it'll give you an estimated award letter. It'll show you, this is what you can expect to receive in financial aid from this school. The important thing about this is that it gives you an estimate, and it's helpful to start making decisions about, what schools are, you may have hopefully the ability to go to because you can afford it. But again, it's an estimated information. It's not accurate to 100%. And every school has one, so I guess what I'm trying to say by that is that it's catered to that school. We put in the questions that are, so answering your question of, what is there a specific thing that a school is looking for that uses to determine a calculation? The net price calculator has all those little things that that school is looking for. So I would do the net price calculator for all of the schools that you're applying to. Don't just do it for one and categorize it into like, oh, this is what it'll be for all the private schools. Every school will have its own net price calculator based on what they're looking for. I do believe that the UCs and the Cal States will have it one for all. I think I haven't really researched it, but that may be the case. But in terms of private schools, every single one will have based on what they use to determine your calculation. The other thing, however, is that it's not going to work for everybody. Divorced families, separated families, families with businesses, it's not going to be very easy to use this or give you a cleaner picture. I mean, it just doesn't work for everybody. So it'll give you the best estimate possible based on what you're submitting in the forms. Yes? I've had families say, it was right on the ball. And I've had families say like, no, it was really far from it. And it's those families that have businesses or, because you have net operating losses and there's things that we don't take into account. So, maybe you are taking money out for using your home as part of your business. You can deduct that from, and we don't take that deduction, we add it back in. So it's just those little things that are not gonna make it as clean. Yes?
We got that in case we need to get the NPC.
I'm sorry? What?
We got, contact with the college.
If you're looking at Columbia, you put in Columbia University NPC, and it'll probably give you straight to the website where that is. Yes, it's on the website, yeah. Okay, yes?
For families that are complicated, like you just described, will you ever have meetings, like a family request to sit down and have you crunch numbers with them if the net price calculator does not reflect? So can you do that in advance?
Yes, families have come in and said, here are my tax returns from last year. This is what I expect to get in 2013. Can we fill it out together? And I say, yeah, this is what I would add, this is what we would do, and this is what, and at that point, I'm not saying this is what you're gonna get, but it's probably a closer estimate than anything else. Okay, so the other thing too is that when you do receive an award letter, you'll receive or have a link to a financial aid policy guide. So in that guide, it'll be almost the answer to all of your questions about financial aid and about your awards and how does this happen and how does that happen and how does a work study work and who do I make my payment to. All of that information will be in that policy guide. So it's something good to look up once you've been admitted to that school. And just to give you a sample calendar, this is our sample calendar. So in January, you're going to be gathering your financial information so that you can fill out your applications by February, be done. You're going to have your FAFSA and your profile is due. So again, our deadline is February 1st. And the reason for that is because we get about over 6,000 applicants and we review everybody. And there's only 3 of us that review. So we work very, 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 very long hours during the months of January, February, March, and April, yeah. It starts to slow down in May, but then we have to work on the continuing students, the students that are coming back. So that's the reason why our deadlines are a lot earlier than the March 2nd for the FAFSA, because we have so many students to look at that we need that time to be able to have an award letter for all of the families that do get admitted. In March, make sure that the FAFSA, if you haven't done it by February 1st, make sure that it's done, and also the GPA verification form, and the counselors have spoken about that. In April is usually, end of March, April is usually when the students start to hear of where they've been admitted and what their award letters are, what they've been offered. And at that point, colleges like ourselves, we require that families then submit tax returns by April 19th. The April 15th deadline stands for the IRS. So by April 19th, we say submit your tax return to us so that we can verify that what you've submitted is correct, and if any changes need to be made, we will make them ourselves and we will review them. And at that point, if you submitted everything, it's official. Okay, there's no changes. And that's the reason why you want to get your stuff in early, because a lot of families don't get their tax returns into us until afterwards. And you know, I just had a family the other day that dad reported $130,000 income, but the tax return, because business and all, October 15th deadline, it came back as $300,000. So they lost some financial aid and they're already at the school. So that's why it's important to get your tax returns done as soon as possible. In May, hopefully, if you submitted all of your stuff, the financial aid becomes official and you know it's not going to change, at least for that academic year. In June is if the students are taking out student loans, that they'll be completing promissory notes, which is the documents that they need to sign in order to say, yes, I'm going to take out this loan and I promise to pay it back. In July is when we send out our first bill, and by August, the first payment on that bill is due. Okay? So different schools have different deadlines, but that's sort of a sample calendar for Occidental. All right, any questions? Yes?
Specific to the CSS because of early living. Determining the price of your house. I heard that there might be an index that you can use. Is that true?
I mean, you can use websites like Zillow. I know I've heard Redfin. There's Yahoo. I mean, there's all sorts of websites that you can use if you don't have like a good, I mean, or have someone who can tell you this is what the cost is. But
The second question has to do with pension. When they ask for your pension net value, is that like all the contributions?
so when it asks for net value, yeah, the total amount of your pension. And if it asks for how much did you contribute to this year, then that'll be whatever you gave on that financial year. Yes, sir.
Gina, what's for a family of 4, in order to qualify for the EFSA, what's the maximum income that you have to make?
There's really no cutoff. I mean, it's just dependent on, there's no income cutoff. It's just dependent on many circumstances. Household size, how many people will be in college, what are your assets. There's really not a magic formula that I can give you.
So we have to go in.
I would use the net price calculator. Yeah, I would use the net price calculator.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes.
I'm an independent contractor, so I'm self-employed.